called into the ministry. You know, what's funny is, to me, I remember the time that I was first called into the ministry. And it wasn't the time that I was first put on a church staff. When I was first called into the ministry, I remember that I was much younger than I am today, and my husband and I weren't even married at that point. We had just started attending a church in Savannah, and I remember overhearing a conversation about how the music director of that particular church really wished that they had a flute player that could play this part in the Easter cantata. And you guys know that feeling, like that feeling that is like neon signs are pointing at you, and you get this feeling in the pit of your stomach like, I know that's me, but God, really, are you sure that's me? Because I'm happy just like I'm going to school full-time, I'm working full-time, I'm working on trying to organize a wedding, and I got things that I got to do. I don't need to be doing this, you know? But you continue to have that spotlight moment where, okay, it's me, you know? And I remember that moment thinking, okay, this is actually when, as a young person, I said, okay, I'm going to get involved. This is my step into ministry. Now, it wasn't when I went on a church staff, it was as volunteer. And that lasted for 2 years, that I played the flute and attended all the rehearsals and did all the things. And it just, it helped me to understand that I have gifts, that I have talents, that I was not gifted for myself, but I was gifted to use in service to other people. And there were many other calling moments moving forward from that time. Now, I do remember the time that I was called into vocational ministry, so called into ministry, and I was working as a curriculum writer for the Department of Education at the time. It was the perfect job for me. I mean, it was my favorite thing. I worked from home, I raised my 2 babies, I could write curriculum, so all of the stuff like I've written for this, I wrote for the Department of Education. I love writing, I love curriculum, and it really was God's provision for me, and I loved what I did. And then I got to stay home with my kids. It was beautiful. And I remember I was driving over the big bridge, okay? For those of you who are here in Brunswick, you know which one I'm talking about. And I remember just praying and having a conversation with God, and then all of a sudden He said to me, I'm going to need for you to do something different. And I remember saying no. He said, no, you're not going to need for me to do something different, because this was the job that you gave me. This is the job I asked for. This is the job you gave me. It was better than I ever could have imagined. I love this job. And He's like, no, I'm getting you ready for something else. And I remember saying, no, you're not. Like, this is the thing that you got me ready for. This is the thing. And I even remember, do not try this at home. But I even remember telling God and saying, you know what, here's the thing. This was your provision for me. This job was your provision for me. So if you want me out of this job, you're going to have to kick me out of this job. Oh, I remember saying those words. A month later, a new school superintendent came in, and all the programs of the old superintendent went out the door, including me. And so I said, okay, God, what's next? You said. And just a couple of months later, He opened the door for me to be able to start in children's ministry vocationally. So that was a calling story that probably did not go as well as the first calling story when I just said yes. But there have been multiple times that I have been called to step into something new. And there have been multiple times that you guys have been called to step into something new. Whether it's serving in a new capacity, whether it's called into the church for the very first time, it may be that you guys felt called when somebody called you on the phone and said, hey, I want you to join this class. Maybe that's your first calling story. And you began to see yourself, wow, maybe I do have something to bring to the body of Christ. So what I'm going to ask you guys to do is I'm going to ask each of you guys to share a calling story, if you will. To share a time that God put on your heart to do something new, to take that next step. may not be vocational ministry. It may be that, just like me, for the first time I was called to begin playing the flute and contributing musically to my church. Maybe it's the first time somebody called you and said, hey, I'd like you to serve in this capacity, and that really changed your life. Whatever it is, what is your calling story? And I'm going to challenge you guys, because here's the thing. I know that I can make my calling story or stories last a really long time. I'm going to give each of you guys 2 minutes. 2 minutes, okay? And everyone at your table, it has the permission to say, okay, you need to wrap it up. Because we all need to hear that sometimes, and we all need to say it sometimes. So if you're going over, actually that's a 3-minute timer, so don't use that, because that's a minute over. I mean, if you go that far, then you're way over. Minute. Okay? So 2 minutes. But I just want you guys to share that at your table, because it's always good for us to remember our calling. It's always good for us to remind ourselves that time that we took that next step into whatever God was leading us to do. So take a few minutes at your table and share your calling stories. Whenever your table is finished, if you get done on time and don't go over, your reward is that you can go over there, get some extra coffee, stock up on some cookies and snacks. Restrooms are right around the corner, right around that curved wall, okay? So you guys share at your table, and then we'll take a little break. All right. So if you guys will turn in your notebook, let me figure out what page this is on. It is on to page 4 in note 5. The one that talks about spiritual gifts.
5 is there.
Page 5. So here's the thing. Whenever God calls us into ministry, He has equipped us with gifts that He has given us to use in this specific area at this specific time for this specific purpose. How many of you guys have ever taken some sort of spiritual gifts inventory? And so a lot of you guys probably already know what your spiritual gifts are. But here's what I think is really, really interesting, is that when I first took a spiritual gifts inventory, many, many years ago, the results that I came away with look a little different than the results that I have now when I take it now. Have you guys, experienced that same thing where years ago God equipped you for the thing that He was calling you to do, and your gifts were one particular area, and then as you lived that out, and as you began to use those gifts, and as you begin to say yes to other opportunities that God brought into your path, He began to raise up different gifts in different ways and new ways. And so what is really, really cool to me is that God equips us, but He doesn't just give us all the things that we need all at one time and reveal all of that at the same time, that there is this beautiful process of discovering. It's like this package that you continue to open, and you continue to open, and it's one of those that has multiple layers, where you open the first layer, and then you see what it is, and then you live in that for a while, and then all of a sudden you begin to see that God's preparing you for the next thing, and then you unwrap that, and you're like, oh wow, I didn't even know, like look at that. And then the things that you used before, you may not be called to use it this time, but God's given you something new for you to discover about yourself. We're going to talk a little bit about spiritual gifts today. We're going to talk a lot more about it in the next session, the next time that we're together in a couple of weeks. But what I'd like for each of us to do is to take a moment and to go through this spiritual gifts inventory, okay? Now, this is a very abbreviated version. There are versions online that are going to take you 2 hours to complete. However you want to identify that is great. You could even just, as you're looking at spiritual gifts, one of the interesting things for me to do is to take it myself, but then to ask somebody else who knows me, ask somebody else who works with me, ask someone else who lives with me in my house, what is it that you see in my life? What are the areas that you see that God has equipped me in for this time, for such a time as this? What are the things that you see in me? And to be able to kind of compare those answers. Because I think a lot of times I don't see the gifts that I bring to the table. I'm sure that you guys, have the same situation where you're not able to recognize those things because we say, oh, God equipped me to be administrative, and this is how I'm going to be for the rest of my life. Well, but that gift of administration might take a back seat to something else because God is beginning to develop that in you. So we're going to take just 5 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes, and I'd like for you guys to read through the spiritual gifts inventory and just mark the things that are indicators of how you see yourself, okay? Now, it would be great if you take this home for homework and share it with a couple of other people and say, how do you see me? Because I think that will give you a more complete picture of your gifts at this time. And try to refrain from just going to the ones that you know have been true of you in the past. Look at it through where you are today and where is God calling you and moving in your life today. Go ahead and go through that, and then there are a couple of questions at the end of that in your notebooks that you'll see to talk about with the people at your table. What are your spiritual gifts, and how do you think God is calling you to use these gifts in ministry at this time? So if administration is your big thing, how do you think God is calling you to use that in ministry at this time? So 5 minutes, go through the thing, share at your table, and then I'll close it back together. Go ahead.